as a student, I was not really interested in Taoism at all. I went into Chinese studies because, well, as a young person, we had very difficult time during the war. My family in Holland, I had nothing much to do. I had no very vague ideas about what I wanted to be in life. And so when I started these studies, I lived in Holland. I went to France. I didn't make any vow, but in my idea I would never go back to Holland again. I never returned. I didn't keep that. 40 years later I did go back to Holland, but never really found my own place there. But anyway, in France I didn't know what to do, but during a converse of circumstances I enrolled in the university and went to learn Chinese because I loved Chinese art. And you see, I had an advantage as a Dutchman, like John, you know. We learn our languages. So I was good in learning languages, and the French aren't. They're awful. So I became a good student. I was the most lousy student you can imagine. You imagine now I'm a member of the Academy, of the Royal Academy. I mean, that is a joke, you know. I was the worst student there. Whenever I wanted to say something to young students, don't believe that you should be a good student or honor student. I mean, things will come by themselves, spontaneously, as the Chinese say, you know. So that was my case. So I learned Chinese, and then I wanted to understand more and more about the background of Chinese art. And because I want to learn about the background of Chinese art, I went to see a teacher, a professor who taught Chinese thought. And he was a specialist of Daoism. So China is huge. So if you, every teacher, he has his own specialty. So he taught me his specialty, which he had from his teacher, who was called Henry Maspero. It's a very beautiful book, Daoism and Chinese Religion, translated by Frank Kierman, published at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. Is that right? Yes. And and of course, Maspero, of course, was a student of Chavannes, who was the first one in Europe to work on Daoist text and Daoist canon and so on. So I was already the fourth generation. But in the long run, you know, I little by little, I started to but we knew nothing about Daoism. My teacher, Carlton Mark, very nice man, wonderful man, he said, we don't know anything about it. We have the idea, of course, the vague notion that the real religious tradition of China is called Daoism, but what it stands for, we have no idea. They had never met Daoist master. They had lived in Beijing, but that was during the 1930s, 1940s. That had been all obliterated. So then I worked in our library. I worked my way through college by working in the library. I was fascinated by the Daoist canon. Nobody understood. So I tried to read that. I asked my masters about all these rituals, these liturgies. He said, no one understands that. But then Life magazine in the early 50s ran a series on the religions of the world. And one issue, I think it's of 52 or something like that, is about religion in the land of Confucius. And it was made in Taiwan. It was a beautiful thing. And they went, these excellent life journalists, they went not only to the Confucian temple or to the president of the, they went to the countryside. And they showed pictures of processions, and especially of Daoist rituals, that no one had ever seen. So my professor called me and said, look here, in Taiwan, it's there. So when I did my PhD and I applied for a grant to go to China, I didn't go to the Chinese mainland. To the horror of my friends and also teachers, because at that time France was already very pro-Maoist, you know, that was the thing. I was going to the wrong China, so I went to the wrong China. But I did. And of course in the beginning in Taiwan that was not obvious at all, because when I came to Taipei and I went to the Academia Sinica and I said, I'm coming to study Taoism, they said, what? Is that worth studying? They didn't think so. And said, do you know any Daoists? He said, we'll ask. And then after a week they came back and said, we're sorry, the last one just died. Historical, absolutely. They didn't encourage me, I can say you that. But I was young, and I liked to walk around in the old city of Taipei. And then one day I went on a trip by myself to the south. And I went saw temple festivals that were so fantastic. These big Taiwan Pai Pai, you know. Taiwan was left untouched. It was a conservatory. The Japanese colonization had left the Chinese society intact. It was fantastic. You can't imagine. If you've never been there, if you want to film something beautiful, go to a big Taiwan Pai Pai. It's one of the most fantastic experiences you can have. 100,000 people doing things together, processions, singing, dancing. For 1 week, not one policeman. No one order kind of organization saying work this way. Everybody knows where his place. If you want to look at this kind of harmonious society, that's it. Really, it works. It's very nice. So I applied to go to Tainan, and it happened that the director of the institute I was part of was a former student of the man I just mentioned, Marcel Granet, you remember in the beginning? So he signed me a letter. You know, at that time, Taiwan wasn't free at all. It was they were very afraid of all kinds of spies, and of course I was a spy by definition. I mean, it should be the CIA or nothing else, send someone to Taiwan to study Taoism. That must be some kind of a pretext for spying out for I don't know what. But he signed a letter and said I could go to Tainan to do field work from that and that day on. He didn't say until when. So with that letter, I just remained there for 8 years. For 8 years. And then, of course, I had already understood that I shouldn't talk too much about Taoism. Wasn't too welcome, you know. The Kuomintang is Christian. They're Wesleyan Methodists. So they didn't go very much for that kind of thing. But so I had a copy of the Daoist canon, but I hid it. But someday, an old gentleman I liked very much, Mr. Jiang, who came to visit me every day, an old scholar, he saw it, you know. I said, why do you have the canon? I told him. I said, you know, in fact, I came here to look for Taoism. He said, have you ever met a Daoist master? I said, no, they told me the last one just died. He said, no, I know one. So we went to see a wonderful old gentleman with good beard. And I paid him a visit and brought him a compliment and so on. I didn't speak Hokkien at that time. I learned afterward to speak Minnan. So I was translated and I said, so you're a Taoist? Yes, already for the 7th generation, you know. And I said, and do you also do rituals? He said, no, all superstition. No, only philosophy, you know. He had learned his Confucian lesson, you know. Huh? But 2 weeks afterwards, I saw him conducting a service in one of the suburbs of the old city of Tainan. And I befriended him. It's a long story, but finally I was allowed, first time any Western ever saw that, I was allowed to see and to observe those enormous jiao, as you call this sacrificial nothing is sacrificed really. The Taoist sacrifice is not killing animals, it's burning paper. But it's also an oblation. You write all kinds of books, then you burn them. Huh? That's also a way of worshipping. So transforming. So I was there. And I looked at it. It was beautiful. The ceremonies went on for days and days, and not the same. It was dancing and music, and in the evening they would give concerts, and it was all in a secluded temple space. Only some representative of the community went in. On the outside of the temple of the Big Jiao, there were tens of thousands of people doing processions, performing theater. But inner, there was the big mystery of was performed. I didn't recognize anything. I sat there, here I am with a PhD in Daoist studies, you know. I have no idea what it is about. But from my place, I had to fast, of course. I had been fasting for I don't know how many days, and white clothes, and because you had to ritual clean. But I went from the place that was assigned to me to look at the manuscripts they brought around, their ritual manuscript. I recognized these were the same texts as I had already seen in the Daoist canon. So I said, where did you get them from? Did you copy them? He said, no, because the Daoist canon does not exist in Taiwan. But these were handed down by our ancestors. So then I knew I had hit on a real tradition. The only way for me to study that was to become their disciple. And it took them 3 months to think about that. But they accepted me. And they trained me in a very conscientious way. I didn't become a good Daoist. It's very hard. It's far more easy to be a university professor than to be a good Daoist priest, I can tell you that. They're despised. They're very, very good. The best one are here in Hong Kong, the so-called Lamo Lao. They're fantastic. Everybody looks down on them, but they are keepers of a fantastic ritual, liturgical, musical, and artistic tradition. Sure. So I was trained, and that opened up a whole part of literature on Taoism that we couldn't understand. You can't understand a ritual if you don't know how to do it. So I learned that. So it opened up. So instead of publishing that field work, which at the time certainly would have interested very few people, I then embarked on studying all these texts in the Daoist canon and explaining them to my students. So there John comes in. He was one of my first students, came from Harvard. He was fascinated by that, so I trained him in this ritual. I told him, and then we did, all together with many people present today, we did a huge project, which was to write the first analytical and critical study of the whole Daoist canon, 1,500 books, of which only 200 or 300 had ever been read before. We dated them, we explained them. It's published by the University of Chicago Press in 2002, finally. Got a prize, an award. Well, that's it.